Hello, Tony Burke here with a short screencast for module ACSS402 Advanced Entry Introduction to Construction Studies, and this screencast is going to cover the preparation and delivery of effective presentations. We'll start by a few points regarding the preparation that's necessary. First point to consider is the subject matter of your presentation. It's really important that you do the necessary research and that you really know the material that's going to form part of the research. You need to make sure that you're fully up to date and that you don't get exposed during the presentation as being perhaps behind the times or not having done the necessary background work to deliver the presentation. You also need to think about your audience. Firstly, who are they? Is it a group of colleagues from the workplace? Is it a group of fellow students? Is it a prospective employer? Is it perhaps a prospective client? All of these different people will require a different approach adopted for the presentation itself. So think carefully about who your audience actually are. How many of them will there be? Will it be a large hall with 50 or 100 people in it? Or will it just be a small presentation to 2 or 3 people? What are the audience actually hoping to get out of the presentation? What will they come away with at the end of the presentation? Is it just with some more knowledge? Are you just conveying information to them? Are you actually trying to persuade them? Do they hope to learn something? How much do they know already? That's a very important point to consider, because clearly if you're speaking to members of the public about a technical issue, then you're going to have to adjust your language accordingly. But on the other hand, if you're speaking to professional people who already have considerable knowledge, then you won't have to bother with the basic terminology. And what's your relationship to the audience? Is it a friendly relationship? Are they open to perhaps mistakes that you might make, or do you have to be very sort of polished, as might be the case if it was a sort of a professional relationship? Where's the presentation actually going to take place? It's important that you don't overlook the basics. It's all very well knowing that you have to make a presentation, but then if you turn up at a building and discover that you're in the wrong place, or you don't know where the actual room is, you can waste a lot of time and create the wrong impression. How big is the room going to be? Is it going to be just a small conference room or a large meeting hall? What facilities are available to you? Again, there's no point in turning up with a laptop expecting simply to plug into a projector if those things don't actually exist. So make sure in advance that you know what facilities will be available. That brings us on to considering the script for your presentation. Now, all of us are likely to develop some basic form of script for a presentation, even if it's just to define some of the key points of the presentation. You should also identify within the script the links between those different key points. Most of us, or some of us, will perhaps write out a full script and almost word for word decide what we're actually going to say during the presentation. That brings us to the question of whether we should actually learn the script, because sometimes learning it word for word, when you make the presentation, it can come across as being very mechanical, very sort of laboured, so it doesn't really sound sort of natural. So you have to think carefully about whether you really want to learn it. Regardless of whether you're going to actually learn it or not, though, it is helpful to have some aide-memoires during the presentation, something to prompt you, to remind you of what you're supposed to be saying. Some people use small cue cards, just postcard size cards, which they write bullet points onto, and they have them in their hand during the presentation as a simple prompt. Other people write fairly extensive notes on paper and refer to those throughout the presentation. Regardless of which technique you use, you need to have some system ensuring that your cue cards or your notes stay in the right order, because if, for example, you were to drop your prompts, then when you pick them up, how will you make sure that they are in the right order? Remember also that the bullet points on your PowerPoint slides themselves act as prompts, so sometimes you can come across as really knowing your stuff without the use of physical prompts, because you've got the bullet points on the slides themselves. A few points on nerves. It's perfectly natural to feel nervous about making a presentation, and indeed I would say it's actually beneficial to feel nervous, because nerves keep us on our toes, they get the sort of adrenaline pumping, they keep us sharp, they make sure that we don't get too complacent about things. However, sometimes nerves can overtake us and we can start to feel very uncomfortable because of our nerves. If that does happen, then we need to try to relax ourselves by breathing deeply and simply trying to keep things in perspective. It's also worth remembering that when you're making a presentation, you very rarely look as nervous as you feel. You might be churning up inside with nerves, but you won't necessarily come across like that to your audience. And I would say that the best way to overcome those nerves is to make sure that in advance of the presentation that you rehearse your presentation. If the presentation is really important, then it's worth rehearsing. Rehearsals enable you to check the output of your presentation, to make sure that what actually happens during the presentation is what you intended to happen. It also enables you to check your timing. If you're working to a time limit, then it's really important that you don't overrun. If you're using Aide-memoires like cue cards or notes, then the rehearsal will enable you to check the quality of those Aide-memoires. And it's also helpful if you get someone to observe your presentation and give you feedback, because often you will be completely unaware of habits that you might have, or you might not really know whether the presentation is achieving what you hoped it would achieve unless someone else looks at it. So get someone else to have a look and give you some constructive feedback. A little bit about the presentation structure. It's very straightforward really. A basic structure, as you would expect for a presentation, should consist of an introduction in which you set out what it is you're trying to achieve, the main body in which you deliver the key points of your presentation, and then a conclusion where you sum up and draw the presentation to a close. That's the same structure that applies to most forms of communication, and as I've said before, the simple way of remembering this is that you should always remember to tell them what you're going to tell them it, and tell them what you've told them. The introduction, the main body, and the conclusion. Okay, on to the delivery of the presentation itself. Start by thinking about your appearance for the presentation, the clothes you're wearing, how you appear to your audience. There's no hard and fast rules for this, but you should make sure that you dress appropriately for the occasion. So if it is a professional presentation to a prospective client, or for a professional interview, then clearly you're going to dress dress for business. On the other hand, if it's just a casual presentation, you may not need to bother so much about what you're wearing. The key thing is though that you should be comfortable. So you should feel comfortable yourself, that your clothes shouldn't be constraining, and also that they shouldn't be distracting, because the focus of the presentation should really be on the content of the presentation rather than on you. Think about your body language, think about how you stand, your posture. This really says a lot about how enthusiastic you are about the subject matter. If you slouch and your shoulders are slumped, then it gives off the wrong message. You might want to consider whether the presentation is going to allow you to move around a little bit. Clearly some presentations will not really be suitable for a lot of movement, but if you can move, then it can help to sort of break up the boredom of the presentation by simply moving around, even if it's just a little bit. Think about how you can use gestures such as hand movements and pointing, not offensive gestures, but simply gestures to help you express the points that you want to make, to bring emphasis to certain points, and so on. And don't forget to smile. Smiling helps puts the audience at ease and ensures that you're seen in an open way. Think about your voice and how you're going to use your voice effectively. So you'll need to think about the volume of your voice. Obviously, if you speak too quietly, then you won't be heard necessarily in the back of the room. But on the other hand, if you shout, then that can come across as being very aggressive and is inappropriate. Think also about the tone of your voice. The last thing you want to do is to deliver the whole presentation in a monotone, because again, that will be incredibly boring for the audience. The speed of your voice will have a considerable impact on how the presentation is received. If you speak really slowly, then again that will tend towards the sort of boring end of presentations. But on the other hand, if you speak really quickly, then there's a danger that the audience will miss what's actually being said. And all the time whilst this is going on, you need to be on top of your breathing. You don't want to be caught short of breath during the middle of a sentence, so make sure that you maintain a steady breathing rate. Try to maintain eye contact with your audience. Actually look at your audience. Don't look at the floor, don't look at your notes all the time, and don't look at the screen. Actually engage people with your eye contact, but don't just look constantly at one person, because clearly that can be quite intimidating for that one person. So vary your gaze around the room. Try to develop a good presentation style. Create some sort of rapport with your audience. You can do that by simply being enthusiastic about the subject matter. But try to be natural. Don't put on a very false demeanour, because that won't be received very well. Think carefully about whether you should use humour in your presentation. If you're comfortable acting in a very light-hearted, humorous way, then that's fine, but lots of people aren't. So if you don't feel comfortable with it, use humour very cautiously. Visual aids are quite important on your PowerPoint slides. They can help to really brighten up the presentation, but it's important that they're legible, that they're simple, that they can be easily understood, and it's helpful if you use colour, because that helps to wake the brain up. A few things that you shouldn't do. These are absolute no-nos as far as presentations are concerned. You shouldn't read from your notes. There's nothing more boring for an audience than watching someone stand there and simply reading from their notes. Try to avoid waffling. People will see through it straight away. Don't look at the screen. It's a common mistake in presentations. People turn away from the audience and they look at the same thing that the audience are looking at. It really is very bad practice as far as presentations are concerned. Don't spend the whole time looking at the clock or looking at the watch on your wrist. It will give the impression that you're anxious to get out of there as quickly as possible. Try to avoid shouting, because again that comes across as being aggressive. Whatever you do, don't be offensive, and be careful about what you say, because you might not consider something to be offensive, but it could be interpreted as offensive by someone else. And don't display bad habits. So don't be scratching yourself or picking your nose or doing lots of ums and ahs and really just coming across in a very negative way. And don't overrun any time limit that you've been set. At the end of the presentation, it's important that you indicate clearly that you've finished and that you summarize the contents of your presentation. You should invite questions from the floor and be quite open about that. And if you don't understand a question, then you should ask for clarification on it. In giving answers to the questions, always avoid bluffing, because again people will generally see through it straight away. So be honest about something that you're not very sure of. And a final point, PowerPoint is famous for all of the bells and whistles that it allows in presentation. It's got lots of moving animations, visual sound effects, and so on. The question is whether you should really take advantage of them. Really, are they an enhancement to a presentation, or are they just an annoying distraction? In many cases they will be really annoying, where you've got things flying in from all different angles and unnecessary noises in association with the presentation. So use them carefully. Only use them if they really are going to enhance the presentation. So that's it from me. I hope that's been helpful. Thank you.